I was elbow deep in untangling a shipping reconciliation script that had been broken since before most of my coworkers were hired when my boss strolled into my cubicle smelling like too much cologne and too little sleep and announced that his nephew Dorian needed my desk by Thursday. There was no warning, no conversation, just a cheerful little bomb dropped between sips of his oat milk latte, and I sat there gripping my mouse while 11 years of unpaid overtime quietly reorganized itself into a single cold realization. Dorian was 24, fresh off a content strategy certificate he'd earned in 6 weekends, and the only spreadsheet skill he'd ever demonstrated was formatting his fantasy football league standings in 17 different fonts. I thought of every 2 a.m. server crash I'd solved alone, every vendor contract I'd renegotiated from a hospital waiting room during my mother's chemo, and every quick favor that had quietly become my full-time job without ever showing up on an org chart. And I simply said, understood, because 11 years teaches you that rage is best served on a timer, not a table. I spent my last 90 minutes at that desk not working, but watching the late afternoon light slide across a keyboard I'd personally worn smooth, and packing exactly 3 things into my tote bag: a cracked mug shaped like a lighthouse, a leather notebook crammed with a decade of undocumented fixes, and a small encrypted drive that held more institutional memory than the entire IT department combined. I left the monitor, the noise-canceling headset, and the little cactus on the windowsill, because none of those things had ever belonged to me the way my competence did. And competence, unlike furniture, travels light. By Friday morning, Dorian had rearranged my old office into something resembling a startup influencer's bedroom, complete with a neon sign that read, "Hustle," and a ring light angled directly at what used to be my monitor stand, and he'd posted a video captioned, "First day running the show," before he'd even located the shared drive. I watched from my kitchen table, sipping coffee from a chipped travel mug, as 3 separate co-workers texted me screenshots with no commentary needed, because we'd all worked together long enough to recognize the particular silence of a ship that doesn't yet know it's taking on water. I didn't wait for the phone calls that I already knew were coming, and instead spent that weekend filing paperwork for a solo consultancy I named Harrow Logistics Advisory, after the street where my grandmother taught me to balance a checkbook before I was tall enough to see over her kitchen counter. I built a simple 3-tier service menu: audit, triage, full operational rescue, and priced the emergency tier high enough to make clear that peace of mind, once it walks out the door, does not come back at yesterday's rate. The first crack appeared on Monday, when the weekly compliance report I'd hand-built and manually verified for 8 straight years failed to land in anyone's inbox, because the credentials, the rotating tokens, and the entire submission process lived only in my head and my notebook. Dorian, undeterred, emailed a major logistics partner, assuring them everything was totally under control, a phrase that aged about as well as milk left on a summer dashboard, since that partner responded within the hour by freezing every open shipment pending a full audit. By Wednesday, my former boss called from a number I hadn't saved, his voice noticeably thinner than the confident boardroom baritone I remembered, asking if I could just pop in for 20 minutes to sort out what he insisted was a small glitch. I let the silence stretch a beat longer than was comfortable, before explaining calmly that I now worked exclusively on retainer with a 90-day minimum, and I could hear something in him quietly fracture as he realized the fixer he'd discarded now had a price tag he could no longer casually afford. He showed up at my door 6 days later, looking like a man who'd aged a full season in a week, tie loosened, eyes hollow, clutching a printout of everything that had gone wrong since I left. 4 canceled contracts, a compliance violation with real financial teeth, and a nephew who had, in his own tearful words during a staff meeting, no idea where anything even is. I handed him my rate sheet instead of sympathy, watched him read the numbers twice as if they might change, and told him gently that losing me hadn't been a glitch. It had been a choice, and choices, once made, tend to invoice themselves eventually. Within a month, two of the company's oldest clients had signed directly with Harrow Logistics Advisory. My old office sat dark and unused because nobody else wanted the weight of that empty chair, and I closed my final tab connected to my old work email with the quiet satisfaction of someone locking a door they'll never need to reopen. No dramatic exit speech, no viral resignation letter, just 11 years of expertise walking calmly into a future that finally paid what it was worth. If you enjoyed watching a quiet professional turn a thankless ending into an unstoppable beginning, please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.